All right, so I was recently asked, what kind of aha moment did you have when you were looking at how best to kind of visualize data or present that data to people? And I would say that the ability to query or do a filter in which you have multiple or and conditions was kind of a game changer for me, because I love using checkboxes in order to allow a user to filter data, because not all users are super comfortable using spreadsheets, and they may not be real adept at using the filtering function on using the data menu, that kind of thing. And so sometimes we want to just take our data we have and allow them to filter it using checkboxes, because those are pretty approachable and they're kind of a newer thing, more or less, in Google Sheets. So what I've got here is a sample data set, and this is just kind of fake, fictitious student data. And it could be employee data, in which you have different categories: pay rate, hours they work, classifications. Imagine whatever it is that you need. So I've got an ID column, I've just got a name column, I've got some fake emails, I've got a sex column, date of birth, class, major, and then GPA. And so maybe we have a user that wants to just look at the freshmen that are on here, or look at a certain major. And of course, we can do this pretty easily by, using a filter and then just selecting a class. And then, we can do this pretty easily if we're comfortable doing this kind of thing. And in addition, I can then pick a major from here as well and say I only want my anthropology majors, so I've got one, right? The issue then becomes, what if I want to do something now with that data? What if I want to figure out an average for that group, average GPA for that group? Well, again, if you've got a user who's not super comfortable doing this kind of thing, maybe they can get as far as to look at all the freshmen, but now maybe they don't have an easy way to calculate this average GPA, even though we know we could kind of do a bunch of different things with it. But at any rate, so we want to take this data and allow our user, without having to use the filtering functions of the spreadsheet, to take this information and drill down on it. And so I'm going to show you two different ways, the query method and the filter method, that allow us to do this. And so what I've got here in our query then is a kind of the finished product, if you will, and I'll kind of walk you through how we build this out. And so what I've got over here is the list of all the different classes that these students could have or possess, what are they classified as, and then all the majors. And so to create these lists, all I've done is do a unique function here, because I'm kind of thinking like this is dynamic, right? Because maybe we copy and paste a different sample data set as we get fresh data each term, or for example. And so we don't maybe want to have these be static listings. That's why the order is kind of weird here, is because I've got it unique and then all these kind of non-blank rows, and then sorted alphabetically. That's why doctoral comes before freshman, which kind of makes sense, but alphabetically it does. You could do whatever you want to with this. I just made this be rather dynamic. And so then we get these checkboxes next to, which allow us to check if there's a certain group or groups that we want to query or filter on this. Same thing with our majors. This is a dynamic list. It's a unique list sorted alphabetically from this group over here. And so again, we're just referencing our sample data, our majors, and our classes. One thing I want to point out that's interesting, I think, with how this works, and a little kind of trick here. First of all, this is a neat little function I had not known about, and thank Ben Collins for this one, is if you take a group of checkboxes here, and if you want to select all of them at once, just hit the space bar, and now they're all checked. Hit the space bar again, and they're all unchecked. And you can do that with any group. You can do it with a whole column. I can check them all, or I can uncheck them all, in which case we get no data here, right? So that's one little tip that's kind of nice to know. The other thing that's kind of fun here is I've got conditional formatting. There actually is a hidden checkbox here, and I've got hidden checkboxes down through here as well. They're not hidden so much as the font color is white and the cell color is white, so you can't see it. And the reason I did that is because right now we've got a large list of majors. We've got a good number of classes here. I think if I go in, I'll show you what I mean. Right now they're all marked on here, and we've got through row 13, we've got a sophomore there. I think there might only be one doctoral student. Yeah. So let's say we eliminate this Vaughn student, or we change that classification from doctoral to, let's just make him a freshman. So if I go back over to here and we find Vaughn, and so we'll just kind of search for him real quick. There he is. And that's going to make him a freshman. So we're eliminating, we're no longer going to have a doctoral category. Okay, so I do that. If we go back over to here, you notice it's gone. So we used to have a row 13 here, and that was where sophomore used to be, and the checkbox is gone too, right? So if I go back over here, I'm going to undo what I just did, put him back, go back. Now it's there again. And so what's going on here, this is kind of a neat little conditional formatting trick. I'll just select these so you can see what it looks like. So over here, this is the custom formula. So I've got this in basically the entire column of column B. And the custom formula is that if there is nothing in column A, meaning if this returns true, if the length here is nothing, what we want to do is make the cell, the text color white, as well as the fill color white. And so there is a checkbox here. It even says it. You may have clicked a checkbox that's not visible. Toggle anyway. And I could say OK. And I don't think Google Sheets likes that a ton, but it's in there. And there is a checkbox here. Let's see if it does it this time. Let's see, it's not liking this. See how it's dragging all over the place? It's not a fan. It's there. It's just toggled off because there's nothing written over here. I think I can spoof it over here as well. If I type in something here, we'll see the checkbox appear because the len function returns a length greater than 0. Kind of neat. Cleans up your data, especially if you have a dynamic kind of list of checkboxes. That may be something you want to do with it. Okay, so let's get into the formula and how this thing works. And so right now we've got this one doctoral student. And so the way this is designed to work is that right now we have got all of our classes, all of our majors. So this is the kind of number crunching that I have going. This is really kind of basic, right? Total in the data set, that's always going to be 200 because it's based upon the fact that we've got 200 students in this list over here. Number meeting the criteria, that's also 200 because we've got all classes and all majors, or any major in any class. As soon as I drop away from that, if I'm no longer looking at that, if I'm looking at just the freshmen, now there's only 88 on here. And indeed, if we look at here, yep, there's 88 of them because there's 2 header rows. Okay, so it's just counting how many are in this D3 on. Additionally, we have a average GPA being calculated. It's just averaging this column over here based upon that group. So again, this is where if we have the ability to sort our data, we can also do some calculations on it that maybe a user who's not really comfortable using Sheets can't do that very well. So here, if I had a data set, I could say, oh, what are my GPA of my juniors, my seniors? And so I could click back and forth and kind of get that. I could look at it from majors perspective and say, what's the GPA for biology majors, for example? There's 11 in here. Their GPA is 238. So you can kind of imagine different ways to do this. Chemistry, same thing. This is all random data, so it's not going to make any sense. But or I could do like, let's look at all the STEM students, biology and chemistry and mathematics. And so you could have a variety of different tools in place to allow you to kind of aggregate that stuff however you want. So let's go back to where we have everybody in here. So how is this being accomplished? So the first trick in here is I've got a hidden column in here, and this is just going to return whatever class I've checked if it is indeed checked or if the any is checked. And so here's the formula that I've got in here. It just says if B4. So let's review real quick for us just to make sure that we understand how this works. If I insert a checkbox here, over here, what is this equal to? And so if I say equals this, it's false. Because if it's not checked, it's false. If it's checked, it's true. So that's all a checkbox is. It's just true or false, but it's a visual true or false. And so if I have that checked, if I say equals if this, then I say it's true, otherwise it's false. So if you have a statement that just says if something, it's going to be checked. You don't have to write even is true. Like if I7 equals true, if I7 equals false, you don't have to do that because it's just evaluating this expression. If I7 is by default true or false because it's a checkbox, it's going to do the true thing or it's going to do the false thing. So that's all that's going on over here is in this box here, it says if B4, meaning if we've checked this any box, then return A5, return the doctoral. Otherwise, so this is the true condition. If all has been checked, return B5. Otherwise, if just flat out B5 is checked, then return A5. And so this is, I just copy that down. This formula is then just copied down among all these. And all we've done here to make sure we've kind of locked in the any one is we've got the $sign there to make sure that one is a specific cell reference. I came across this with this whole query function. So one of the problems you might run into is that some of the things, the data that you're dealing with may have parentheses around them. Queries kind of don't like that because queries oftentimes are built around the idea of having a formula inside of a parentheses to begin with. And so you've got to create escape characters. That's what is in here. If you look at in this box here, I've got escape characters around the opening parentheses and the ending parentheses so that I can properly look for it. So that's what this substitute is that's in here. It just says if you find a parentheses anywhere in the string, then replace it with a backslash parentheses, which is, so the backslash is the escape character. That way the query later on is going to know not to kind of close itself off because it sees a parentheses. That one kind of threw me for a loop for a while there. You don't need this. In fact, you need to make sure you don't have this on our filter tab that we're going to look at in a second here because filters don't care about parentheses. Only queries do because of queries, right? So that's what's going on here in this hidden column is it's returning the names of anything that's been checked. There's just accounting, anthropology. So now I'm kind of just getting these one at a time on here. And again, then I'm getting that stuff returned over here. As soon as I uncheck it, it goes away. Okay, so that's what is going on in this hidden column. So I'm just going to go back and hide that again. So that's a little bit of a helper column to make life easier for us. Okay, so let's get into the query itself because this is kind of a mess. This is a header row. You could choose to duplicate the header row from the actual data set, whichever headers you wanted on here. I chose not to because I want to be able to sort the data. And if you include header rows and try to sort it, it's going to alphabetize or whatever your header row, which you probably don't want to do that, right? So here is where the formula is, and it's kind of a bear to look at on here. First of all, I've got a sort function wrapped around the end of it. It's just sorting it by column 4, which in our case is our GPA column. And then it's being sorted false, which means it's being sorted in a descending order, so highest GPA to lowest. So that's what the outer kind of wrapper is the sort function. The query itself is on the inside part of it. Let's kind of deconstruct this really quickly here. So our data set is the sample data A2 to H. So that's just going to be everything on here. That's cool. And what we want to do with it there is we want to select B, F, G, and H. What I love about a query, obviously, is the ability you can just very easily kind of extract certain things and then put them in whatever order you want. So I did B, F, G, H. There's nothing saying I couldn't do G, F, H, B, right? Queries don't care what order. You don't have to go alphabetical or whatever. That's one really nice feature that a query has. In this case, I elected to just pick those 4 and then alphabetize or then go from left to right with it, but you don't have to. Now here is where it gets interesting. So inside here, we can see we've got an AND clause. So what we have is that we've got the F column needs to match one of our classes, and then the G column needs to match one of our majors. Okay, so the F column over here is the class, and the G column is our major. So these are the 2 sets of checkboxes that we've got. And we're looking at C row or column C, again, that's our hidden column that we've got. So what's going on here? So the neat part, and this is, you don't see this very often. I don't know why it doesn't come up more often, but this way this is written is the pipe in here, the vertical pipe. These things in here represent an OR clause in a Google query. And so what this is basically saying here is that show me all of the students whose class matches anything that's been selected over here. So right now there's none because we have not selected anything. If I say I want freshmen and juniors, then it's only going to look at freshmen and juniors over here. Again, I'll hide that again. And so it says it's only going to indicate where it's C6 and C10. So this one is true and this one is true. Each of these little vertical pipes are an OR statement. So it says referencing cell C5, C6, C7, and down the line, the ampersands are on either end to represent the cell reference in a query. The triple quotes are there just to kind of offset it. There's different ways, as I understand, to do queries where you can do a single quote with a double quote or double quote, single quote, or whatever. For mixed data, which potentially could include numbers and strings, triple quotes seems to be the most efficient way to kind of encapsulate whatever kind of mixed data you might have. But I think your mileage probably will vary a little bit on that. But that's what I've chosen to use, is that I've got these triple quotes around the entire expression. And then within each of these, I've got these OR statements offset by single or quotes with this pipe in between them. It's a handful, right? To create this and type this up is kind of a pain. It's not too bad for here because I'm only looking at, a dozen or so OR conditions. Obviously it gets much, much more involved here when we've got so many majors that we're looking at that I've got to deal with. So what I've done is I've made a query formula helper, which is just there to help you type it the correct way. And so what you can do in here is anything you want. So if I were looking at, for example, the this section here, that's going to be cell C5 through potentially C15. And so if I go in here, I can go C5, and then I'm just going to go C6, and then I can just kind of drag these guys down to create a nice numbered list. And I only want that many. This here, that's the formula that's creating this string, this concatenate formula with text join kind of in there. All you would need to do then is you take this part of this formula there and then jump back into, hide this again because it's bothering me. Go back into our formula, and then now I'm just going to say it's going to be equal to this. Wherever the triple quotes are, I just paste it, and I've got it. And so that way you don't miss anything when you're trying to do it. So that's kind of built in to this spreadsheet, is the ability to help you make. Again, it's more effective for if you've got, 20 or 30 or 40 kind of things you're trying to deal with, like I did over here. So that's how that works. Just remember that when you finish it, you have to include the single quote or the double quote at the end to close off the query. And then, of course, the parentheses. And then if you're doing a sort, you can do that in there as well. And so that sample formula is right here. And so it just says paste year 1 and paste year 2. That's where you'd paste whatever you get out of this area. So that's kind of neat. I mean, I think it's a neat way to do this. Obviously not leveraging a lot of the query because I'm not doing any kind of counting or aggregating or labeling or whatever. It's just simply finding that data. Ooh, that's the filter. We're not going there yet. It's just kind of finding the things that match. And then over here, I'm doing a complete separate kind of aggregation or summation, averaging of that data. Okay? So that's the way you could do this with, it says filter result, but using a query to do it. The filter function kind of operates under the same way, but obviously the structure of a filter is a little bit different. The one key distinction here, again, like I said, you've got to watch for is that in my query hidden formula, in this section, I have to do the substitute because I've got to offset parentheses with an escape character, that backslash. Otherwise, the query is not going to like it. In a filter, you can't do that. And so you're just going to keep the same, whatever formula you kind of used up here, which is just, hey, if it's all, pick it. If it's not, just see if it's checked. That's the same formula you're going to use here. And so this is the exact same kind of structure here as you have up here. There's no substituting going on inside the filter. How is the filter formula different? Well, it's kind of the same basic premise in that you have a lot more stuff here, right? But you have or statements and an and statements. So with the way that the filter works, the plus signs act as or symbols, whereas in the query, the pipes separated by quotation marks were the or symbols. Okay, that's one kind of key difference. The other thing to watch for with the query is that each instance that you're trying to do an or statement with, separate those or wrap those, if you will, inside of parentheses. I don't know that you have to do that, but it makes it a lot easier to read and kind of parse out when you're looking at it later. Then you wrap the entire filter, obviously, in a single quote, which is what these are on either end of it. Okay, so that's an or statement, and there's the or connector. And then so it's doing the same thing the other one did, is that does the sample data in column F, which is here, does that equal our classes, which are in column C? So C5, C6, C7. The other thing I should mention, I'll back up here for a second, is that, again, queries are a little cleaner in that when you take a query and you say, I'm querying this data set, I want columns A through H, look at all of it, but really I only want B, F, G, and H. And so I'm just extracting those columns very, very easily out of here. It's a little more clumsy to do that with a filter because what you have to do is you've got to wrap it in curly braces. And so I'm filtering column B, so there's my curly brace and a comma, and I'm also then going to include column F through H. And so I don't say give me the whole thing, but only select 1 through, or these 4 columns. I've got to only pick out those specific 4 columns. It happens to be that F through H is contiguous. Otherwise, I'd have to kind of have 4 maybe separate kind of filtered areas separated by commas if I were trying to do it this way. But the result's the same. You get the same kind of group. You just wrap it with the curly braces to represent, I guess, an array area. Maybe that's what those are doing for us. But like I said, within it, then it's the same. It's like, is that student's class equal to whatever's in C5 if that's chosen as a doctoral student, or a freshman, or a graduate, or whatever, right? So that's what these are representing here. It's the same thing. The star or the asterisk, that is the and connector in a filter. And so it's the same thing now down below here. This whole mess here, this is the or statements for all of the different majors that we might have. So again, in our filter, or in our query rather, it's a little cleaner because it's just separated by pipes. We don't need to do a separate area. Is it equal to that? Is it equal to that? Whatever. It just kind of works that way. Within the filter, then we've got to say, is that row or is that column equal to that major? Is this row, which is the same row, equal to that major? So you've got to kind of include it every single time that you do the filter. And then we've got the sort around it on the end like we did before. Again, because this is kind of a mess to create, I've created a filter formula helper, much like I did the query formula helper. You just enter in what things you want to query. It creates the string for you. The filter formula, same deal, except I've added one kind of layer because it just kind of makes the whole thing for you here. What you want to be sure that you do here is include what is the sample column within which you are filtering. And so in this case, it's G, which would be equivalent to, I think G represents G represents that student's major. And so what we'd be creating in this particular example here is I've got G in here, which means we are looking at all of the possible majors that that student might have. So all of the stuff that's in through here. And so I type that in there. I say that's where I want to be filtering. And then again, I just copy and put in here all of the different OR cells, if you will, that I want to include. And then it will pop out this thing. And that's the formula it does this. It's a text join wrapped in an array. It's just a mess, right? But it does it for you. That way you don't have to type it in manually. You just kind of copy and paste this. And so again, here's what you do. Copy and paste one. This would be, in this case, with our data set, that would be the student's class. And you change the sample data to be, what was this class? The class was F, right? So we'd make that be F over here. And if I do this, you'll see real quickly, this turns into Fs. And then these would then become whatever the classes are here, C5 through C15, okay? And then you just copy and paste that into wherever it needs to be in that formula. So yeah, the end result that you get out of both these is the same. It's not a huge data set. I've only got 200 rows of data, and so you might find that one is a lot faster than the other. I think typically queries are a little slower than filters, but it might depend how many rows you have. It also depends if you're trying to import that from another tab or even another sheet, which makes things a lot messier with filters because you got to include that import range every single time, which I think is going to really cause a problem for you. But if you can imagine a use for this, I'd love to hear it. It's kind of a simplistic example that I've got here, but it does provide a pretty elegant interface, I think, for the user in order to kind of visualize this data, and then you can create any sort of aggregation with it, or a graph or a chart that's created dynamically based upon whatever those filtered results are. So there you have it.